Zee, where we share everyday stories with you, everyday women. Are you ready to hear heart-to-heart key issues that we all face, no matter where we are in the world? So grab your cup of tea and let's welcome your host, author, international speaker, reinvention strategist, and woman that's full of faith in God and mankind, Dr. Zee Arinze.
Hello, everyone. Hello and welcome. My name is Dr. Zee Arinze, and you are welcome to another episode of A Cup of Tea. A cup of tea, a cup of tea, a cup of tea. Yes. Ooh. Sorry, a bit hot there. With me, Dr. Zee. You are absolutely welcome. This podcast, what do? We spotlight amazing, extraordinary, everyday women all over the world doing extraordinary, amazing, incredible, phenomenal things. And today is episode number 31. I am so incredibly proud of how much we've achieved in just under a year. We started on the 8th of December. So it's almost a year, the 8th of December. And we have been going non-stop, except for a little time, maybe between March and about May when I lost my mum. So I thought, in reverence to her, I thought, just have a little bit of a break. But other than that, we've been going non-stop every Friday. And every Friday has been live, except one show where we pre-recorded. So I am so grateful to be in your homes, in your rooms, in your countries, wherever you are around the world, streaming live, talking to amazing women just like yourself and just like me, women who I would say are enough. You might be listening right now. You're saying, Dr. Zee, you don't know my story. It's easy for you. You're so full of energy. You're always lively. You're always positive. Forget that. I'm not always anything. But what I am is an everyday woman just like you. I like to show up so that you can show up. I like to show up so other people have the chance to be heard and seen. And for those that are invisible, your stories are also shared. One of the main reasons I do this, it's a passion project. It's not one of my coaching where I charge people or anything. So it will always be free. You can come and listen to it when it's on Spotify, when it gets uploaded, or watch it when it's live right now, whether you're on LinkedIn, on Instagram, or in any of my YouTube channels, or wherever it is that you watch this, or perhaps you watch it on the replay. But it's really to encourage, to inspire, to motivate. Sometimes it's to give you a kick up the blessed assurance, but it's to just make you understand that, like they like to say, Ubuntu, I am because you are, or you are because I am, vice versa. And we all have incredible stories. We all have challenges, especially as women. We have challenges, all sorts of challenges. It could be childbirth, it could be health, it could be relationships, it could be mental health, it could be work related, money related, but it doesn't matter. Whatever we face as women, we're like octopuses. We face all these various challenges and still we're able to hold it together as much as we can. Without us, the world cannot stand. So I just want you to really take a moment to take a deep breath, and I'm taking a deep breath as well because I've just said that in 5 minutes without even breathing. So I'm breathing as well. And I hope wherever you're watching this from, please share in the chat, whether you're watching on YouTube, LinkedIn, whether you're watching on Instagram, wherever you're watching. And yes, I don't have Facebook anymore. And that was where most of my audience was. Facebook got hacked on the 29th of June. I keep saying this, hoping that someone from Meta will hear this and sort this out. My Facebook got hacked. So if you were following me on Facebook, I'm so sorry. But no matter, you can still watch on YouTube, and it's making me not use Facebook as a crutch anymore. So I have to use my other channels. So it's all good. It's all good. But if you happen to be listening, just get your cup of tea. If you don't like tea, get your coffee. If you don't like coffee, get water. Whatever it is that you like, get a sip of wine. I won't tell anyone if you don't. Biscuits, cookies, cakes. I know maybe your doctor said no more sugar, like he told me, no more sugar. But if you're having a bit of cake, I'm not going to tell anyone if you don't. Shh, it's a secret. I promise I won't tell anyone. And if you're listening and you're thinking, Zena, what are you saying? What are you saying? What I'm saying is I want you to relax. Whether you're in my time zone, which is now 7 p.m., just after 7:09, or whether you're in Australia, whether you're on the continent in Africa, whether you're in the USA, wherever you are around the world, New Zealand, wherever you are, I just want you to relax. And if you're still at work, please, please, please have your earpods in. I don't want your boss to tell you off. Have your earpods on. Don't laugh too much or don't cry too much, but just listen and take in. Now, my next guest, oh my days, it's like every single guest I have is amazing. Every single one. I happen to be extremely fortunate to be able to know people on every single continent in the world, and to have this opportunity to really share this platform with so many amazing women makes me cry. I'm honored, I'm privileged. And my next guest, you're really going to love her. You really will. And you're going to say, well, Zena, I love all your guests. Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. Now, this is not the one where I can pretend I'm not reading. I'm reading, so I'm bringing my phone. It's normally on my screen, but I can't see. I think I'm wearing the wrong glasses. I'm going to use my phone. I like to be real and, authentic. As those of you that know me, I'm your girl next door, although I'm not a girl anymore. I think I'm a girl. Right, let me tell you about my lovely, lovely, amazing, phenomenal guest. Now, I'm not going to tell you her name because you would have known that, but I'll tell you. Dadirai, and I always pronounce her name wrongly, Babra Ngwena, is a native of Zimbabwe. So if you're maybe my age or a little bit older, you remember that Zimbabwe was once Rhodesia, and it had it was, around the same time of apartheid, and they had Ian Smith, if I remember. I think Ian Smith was the prime minister at the time. So this is taking me years back. I can't even. My dad will be proud of me because I didn't even know that I remembered that. And she was born and raised in Harare, the capital city of Zimbabwe. She began her career as a high school teacher at one of the city's prestigious boys' schools in the city. She then found herself transitioning, or I like to say reinventing or changing careers, when the HIV/AIDS pandemic ravaged many children and families all over Africa, especially in Zimbabwe, at a time when the population was less than 7.5 million and was considered as having the highest number of people infected with this horrible disease. It's during this time that Barbara was able to find out and discover that her passion for working in advocacy spaces was really heightened. She went on to study psychology and further on social work with a focus on mental health. Throughout her journey, she's worked as a national program officer with the YMCA in Zimbabwe. She's also been, worked in several advocacy positions all over the world, around Zimbabwe, around the rest of Africa, and in the USA. And in partnership with the University of San Francisco, she developed and contributed to the first HIV/AIDS school curriculum, which continues to influence learning materials on this subject till this day. Her work at the time was featured in the magazines, Scientific, and in America. In the late 90s, Dadirai moved to Lyon in France and later moved to the USA, Fort Wayne in Indiana, where she has been based for close to 22 years. She doesn't look like a day over 25, even if I say so myself. She has extensively worked with immigrants and refugees and has helped to develop materials to support their well-being, including the curriculum to train interpretation and translation services. Dadirai has also presented and trained professionals in the social work space across the state of Indiana on topics that promote social justice and general well-being of women and children. Her background as a trained teacher and a psychology major and a mental health specialist, including her background in human services, has created her with several opportunities to work around the world, especially with the so-called invisible members of the community. And we will be touching on that today. A few of the topics she has spoken about at state level include human trafficking, sexual violence and sexual assault, family violence, mental health, mental wellness, and addictions. She currently provides consulting services to the state of Indiana as the state equity consultant for the 988 crisis response line covering all 92 counties. Now, if you know anything about America, you know that covering counties, if you're here in the UK, it's like boroughs. Last but not least, in fact, there's so many. She's also, this is really important here, I like this. She's also the CEO of Biz Global Group. It's a company that works together globally to connect small, medium, and large businesses and works to promote investment opportunities between countries, the USA, Africa, and Europe, and other parts of the world. At the core of this is philanthropy, as well as economic empowerment and economic growth for many communities around the world. Now, last but not least, she loves to travel, she loves to hike, and I can't understand that. She's an African woman. She loves to hike. Now I need to change. I've hiked once, and I'll talk about that when I bring her on the show. And that was just because it was a dare. She loves to taste new foods, and she likes to connect with other cultures, and is a sponge. She really is a sponge for learning anything new. Without further ado, and drum roll, drum roll, drum roll, drum roll, drum roll, I'm going to bring on the amazing Dadirai Babra Ngwena. Let's bring her in. I hope you're all drum rolling. Yeah. Hello, I didn't pronounce your name properly. Dadirai. Have I done it
No, you
correct?
did well. You did well. I was just having fun in the background. I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm supposed to connect with people, not to look at the whole, that whole portfolio in our space that we do. So thank you for having me, Dr. Z. I'm excited. I
I
really
received
am.
it. Well, thank you so much for gracing the invite. Good evening. I'm looking at people that are saying good evening. Let's see. Good evening. Wow. Good evening. Someone saying no sugar for you. Are you like me? No sugar? I won't tell anyone if you don't. Hello, Dorothy. Yes, have a cuppa. Good evening. Wherever you're watching, just say, if you're watching on LinkedIn, you're welcome. You're welcome. Barbara, Dadirai, which one do you
Mhm.
prefer me to call you by?
Honestly, you can use either. I am comfortable with both of them, so I'll make it easy for you. Let's go with Barbara.
All right, let's go with Barbara. Let's go with Barbara. Oh, fantastic. Thank you so, so much. Right. So, like I said, today's show is really about talking about the invisible Sheroes. And when I was thinking about, asking the Holy Spirit, what we will talk about, it just occurred to me that there are so many invisible people
Yeah.
all around the world who never get a chance to have their stories shown. And
Mhm.
I think it's really, really important that when we have platforms like this, rather than saying, look at me, I'm so amazing, it's
Mhm.
about really using every opportunity we have to share people's stories and also share what we do. So
Mhm.
today, like I said, is episode 31, and it's called Sheroes, making the invisible visible. And like I said, you're an international social justice advocate, you're a consultant, you have so many crowns. You're a teacher, you're a trainer, you're a mental health specialist, but above all, you are a humanitarian. You have
Mhm.
you have the empathy of, you're so kind, you're so thoughtful, and you really want to make a difference in your space. And
Yeah.
so this is why I'm so incredibly grateful and privileged to speak to you.
Mhm.
So there are Sheroes everywhere, and you're a Shero, you're my Shero, but I know that the people that you've met too, you've met so many
Mhm.
Sheroes in your own space as well. So my first question to you would be, let's just have a quick look at the chat. Oh, Althea Black. Hello, Althea. Hello, Fikile, or other people. Let me just put them on so they can see. Hello, hello. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. So
Hello,
my
hello.
I know. My first question to you would be really, what really motivated you,
Mhm.
because your journey, when I was reading your bio, your journey spans all over the continent,
Mhm.
all over, when I said all over the world, the African continent, in America, in
Mhm.
Europe, there's very few places you have not touched. So I want you
Mhm.
to tell us a little bit about your background and what initially inspired you to do what you do, especially with regards to social justice.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Z, and thank you all the people who are on here on the show. it, like I always start off by saying, as much as you look like you've accomplished all these things, when it's been on God's radar for you to be doing this, sometimes these things happen without you even provoking any type of actions to activate that. But one thing I remember when I was growing up, I come from Zimbabwe, as you've already heard. Family of six, five of us girls, beautiful sisters I share in that family, and one brother. And we were not the richest, family. But one thing I knew we were rich in was love between my mother and father. And we would do this. It all started where you would be going to school, you come back home, mom has a lot of people sitting in the yard, right? When you talk about Zimbabwe, we live in gated communities. You gate your home, like every other place. And you knew that night you were not going to be eating any food that's kind of like cooked, because she would make special meals for those people who were the invisibles. People who would be selling vegetables on the streets, people who would not have fees for their children. And I never understood that, right? So she would deprive us, but would give. But there was also that piece where in that process, you understood that life is not just about you. So speaking back to the Ubuntu, when you began, right? I am because you are because I am. That was kind of introduced to me when I was very young. I knew from both my parents that when you are in existence in any society, in any world, you are meant to be part of that whole ecosystem. And then to top it up, when it comes to the world travels, our grandfather from my mother's side, him and his mom ended up in Zimbabwe, and we are still trying to find out his original country, right, on the continent. But we knew, and he would always say, and back in the day, I remember when I was maybe 7 years old, you would always talk about, you must visit the world, you must see the world, because you cannot only just learn about yourself. And it inspired us, right? And my mom comes from a family of about 13. So cousins are all over the place, all over the world. And that was an inspiration that was there. And then fast forward, I knew I had interest in understanding human behavior, because I would sit, I was the quietest child. And for people who know me, who love me, and I know Dr. Z, you are laughing. I was the quietest child you can ever imagine. I know it doesn't sound true. But, my dad literally would actually come and say, look for me, because everybody else would be out playing, but I would be writing diaries, because I loved journaling. I dreamed of places that were beyond, and what I could do, what human behavior, what it incites, what it provokes, and what it also brings: joy, happiness, sadness, all these things, all in one. And then, of course, my career, is any other child in Africa. You go to school, they want you to have a career and all that. Started off as a teacher, as you indicated. But at that time, in Africa, a lot of our blood for the hospitals, right, is focused on high school and primary school kids, right? So we draw blood from there because it's considered clean. So at that time, there was not much talk going on about HIV and AIDS. But I was at one school, it's called Churchill Boys Eye, but one of the other schools, I'm going to not name the school, when they were testing the blood, right, to make sure that it was ready and pure, ready to be utilized for hospital and medical purposes, there were 25 young boys who had their blood was infected with the virus. Wow. And so it was just a shocker, because if people know Zimbabwe, if you know Zimbabwe, we are a very conservative country. And at that time, nobody actually thought our kids were having sex, right? Because we are just assume you're staying away from sex, but that's not the truth, right? Young teenagers are always indulging in all different kinds of things, but having sexual connection here was something that was very brand new. And so I want to just make sure that I'm very clear on here, because it depends where you are in the world. For us in Zimbabwe, most of our infection came from heterosexual interactions, right? So when you move to Western world or different parts, you also hear a lot of the LGBTQIA piece, right? Where you have, sharing of needles and so on, right? Or drugs or whatever the case may be. So because of that, it brought a new challenge in the country. And I remember telling my father at the time to say, it's either I'm going to run for political office, like, you get this, because I was like, I need to change something. It's either I'm going to run as a political officer, or I am literally leaving teaching because I have to do something. I knew I had to do something at the time. And I remember applying for my first job as an advocate with the YWCA of Zimbabwe. And I became their first national youth program officer, because most of our infections were with teenagers between the ages, not even even pre-teenage ages, from 10 to about 17. So we became a dying country because because of the prevalence that was high, and life expectancy at that time was actually 37. So you can imagine. And that's the reason why it really pulled a lot of international focus on Zimbabwe. Here you are, you're a small country, you are centered amongst many other big African countries, but you have the highest prevalence of HIV in the world.
The world,
In
yes.
the world. So we were literally dying, and it came just like that and hit hard, and no one knew what to do at the time, right? And so that began my journey, and I didn't even know anything about HIV and AIDS until I was in the mix of it, learning and watching your own family members, die every day. And at the same time, you're trying to do this good, and you're learning about a lot of things. And that's where I realized, okay, God was just guiding me in a way that I was not even aware of, where you would learn a lot of not only myths and beliefs and things that were involved in
Yes.
there. So you had to unravel all that, because
Yes.
you couldn't just work to prevent or education, but you had to make sure you're understanding what is going on here.
Yes.
And that's my intro there. But I want to just share with you one of my very moments of turning points, so to speak, the acceptance, right? We had one particular area in Zimbabwe that had just had the highest infection rates, and it was a very small community. And I remember I had to be talking to chiefs. Here you are, you're a city child. You know what it is. You're a city child. You're wearing
Yes.
your pants, you're wearing whatever. The first time I went there, the chief would not talk to me.
Talk to
Like,
you. So
you
how
come.
this woman? Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
and he's saying, how can you come? You girls from the city, you come here, you're dressed like this, you have no respect, right? So I remember sitting down crying, because my dad, he was, he raised us in the city. And I said, I don't even know what I'm supposed to do, but I know I need to do something. And he said to me, nothing is going to change you to go in and dressed up the way they are expecting you, because what you're wanting to do is agreeing to disagreeing, because you want to make this change. You've got to respond to some of the things they're asking for. And I
Yes.
knew that, okay, I had to have the humility to be able to do that, not
Yes.
have the arrogance of thinking I'm a city child,
Yes.
you're not going to tell me what to do.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I changed up. I went and met him the first time, and I sat down for the first time in my life, sitting down on a, like, your floor, not on a chair, because you are used to sitting on a chair, because that's
Yes.
your norm. And I
Yes.
remember him saying to me, the first thing he said to me, he said, white people are bringing this disease. Our children have forgotten how to eat the fruits, and so on and so on. They are spraying all these things. That's why we are dying. And I remember at that moment, I said, God, I don't even know. This man, does he understand science, in my head, right? But something came to my mind in that moment. And that's where you realize that when God has ordained you to do certain work, he will give you words to say. And I
Yes.
was young. I was in my early 20s. I just graduated, and left teaching after 3 years. And I remember saying to him, I totally agree. that they have sprayed all these sprays, they've done all these things, but our children are dying. We want them to eat those fruits. How can we get back to that space? And you know what he said? He looked at me for about probably 6 minutes, and I had a pen. You know how we are all modern kids, and you think we are writing notes all over. And says, "That's a beautiful pen you're holding. Can I see it?" And I gave it to him, and I said, "Well, you can also have it." And that opened up the door for me to get into that community, to a point where he literally gave me land in that small community just from that interaction. And so we began work now to start to find out. We're doing all these studies to understand what is needed. How can we help? We don't have medicine, but we know we need to do something. So it became a situation where not only were we allowed now permission to go in and speak to schools in that community, but also getting to understand what was the uniqueness about that specific community, why there was that high prevalence, right? So we understood it was in a mining area, right? It was in a mining area. There was a lot of that was going on there. And there were a lot of myths that were going on in terms of the cure of the disease. So that's where my journey took a shift, hearing stories from young girls telling me, well, I was violated sexually by my uncle because he's trying to get, to heal his HIV. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, what have I just opened up? And I remember getting home, crying so hard, right? And thinking to myself, how can a human being, for me, that was my starting point. How can a human being think by violating another, it becomes your journey, right? And so I learned a lot, and it gathered a lot of the experience. And people don't even realize that I use that example in everything that I do, right? Because it opened up a path for me to understand when you are going to be working in situations where people are so desperate, it's very easy to forget the ones we are always forgetting and leave behind, right? We progress, but we leave behind certain people, certain communities, because they're either poor, they're either undocumented, they're either not significant in our path of what
our estimation, yes,
exactly, in the system and how we want it to function. So it just became part of who defined who Dadirai is today and will always be. And I pray that I continue to be in the same space. I believe I work through the same lenses as well. So yes, a long response to a short
I
answer.
love it. I love it. You notice as you were speaking, I didn't interrupt you at all because I love it. There's so many things that you've said. One of the key things is about humility. Sometimes we might know the answers or we might want to help, but when we're not, humble enough, we can't penetrate. And it's about being able to break down barriers, being able to break down borders. And you're absolutely right. I can still remember, in the 80s and the 90s, the rumors across Africa, Zimbabwe in particular, and other, in terms of, in fact, even you look young, even babies were being raped because they felt, superstitiously, and you touched on that, superstitiously, if they get a newborn baby, maybe this will cure them of the disease, and you're absolutely correct, on the continent at the time, sex was something that, I've grown up in a time where, you're seen and not, you're seen and not heard. And so you're not having sex. And if you are having sex, you're hiding. So it's not like now that young people, are freer and they do what they, at that time, you want to make sure that you look a particular way to your parents, your aunties, your uncles, and all that. So I can imagine that would take Zimbabwe by surprise.
Yes.
Like all the rest of Africa, because as far as you're concerned, you get married. And this is nothing to do with your faith. It's like you get married and then you have sex. So unless you've been married off. So for that to happen, and then obviously, like you rightly pointed out, with the suspicion, the native medicine, and all that, all the beliefs and all, that we believe in, They think,
Yeah.
where has this come from? Where has this come from? Where has this come from? Okay, if we do this,
Mhm.
it'll solve the issue. So I hear what you're saying 100%.
Mhm. Yeah.
And
And I also want to just say this as well, so we don't vilify our, our male counterparts, because it was a time of panic.
absolutely,
Imagine we just had a pandemic in COVID, right? So no solutions, and you are a country that's still growing, right? You're still developing. There were no answers. There was no medicine. So, and we, we are a country that has a mixture of, Christianity, beliefs on the ground, that are there. So people were reaching out just to get that help, and so it became almost, a war zone of medical response, that nobody knew what medicine to use. So there was that piece that caused all these things. And it's not to, because there was so many survivors that came out of there. There were so many perpetrators that also came out of there. But it was a mixture of this confusion, the fear, the everything that you can imagine going on. And here you are. I can tell you at that time, we actually, even data was showing 1 in 4. That's a very big number. One in
absolutely,
four was
yes,
infected, or you knew family members who were
yes,
suffering from HIV, or
yes.
had already had the full-blown AIDS at the time. So, and imagine coming the way COVID came. At that time, there was not enough information to even, share with people, to say, no, 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 this is not who we are, and that's not the response to it.
Mm.
So it was almost like you are building this prevention piece. At the same time, you're also trying to understand the pandemic as well. So
I mean, if you put it even I mean, thank you for that clarification. But I think, people listening now on the replay, we can liken it to, this is human behavior. When we don't understand things, it's like it's stampede. So they always
yeah.
say, if you go to a concert or there's a bomb, please wait till everyone, but no one's going to wait. You're going to push, kick, and sometimes, like for instance, recently, probably I think just before COVID, I think it was just before COVID, when this happened in the UK, when Ariana Grande came and did a concert, a massive concert, and something happened, and there was a stampede, and 3 or 4 young girls that went to see her died.
Oh, wow.
Where
I
there's a
did not know that.
So when there's lots of people and you don't know what's happening, you forget about everybody except yourself.
That's
You know,
it.
you want to figure out how can I start, and it's just like when you hear, I've seen, I don't know if this has happened, or maybe it has happened, where if there's a massive air crash and people are stuck maybe in the mountains somewhere and they're waiting to be rescued, they wait 1 week, 2 weeks, 3. After a while, they start looking at each other and they start eating. They
Yeah.
start, there have been loads of films on. So that's the human nature. I would like to believe that I would never do that, and we all want to believe that we would never do that. But when you're placed in that kind of situation, we don't know what we can do.
That's
We
it.
really don't. When COVID came, and I don't know if it's a positive, but the only positive thing about COVID, no, there are lots of positive things, because people, people died, and that's really, really sad, and we all lost members of our family or friends. But a positive thing was that it happened to the world.
Yes.
So it happened to the world. So that stampede couldn't happen, and we have to stay in our homes. If it happened to one country or two, or if it happened just to Africa, for instance, we know. We already know what that would look like. But this time, and then also, like you rightly pointed out, in the West at the time, and it was not even true. That wasn't even true. But in the West at the time, when HIV and AIDS came, they were saying, okay, this was a disease for homosexual partners, which is not true. But that's what they felt, and so you could see America, UK, the rest of Europe were looking at that demographic very suspiciously.
Oh, yeah.
Not understanding that it could happen through blood, it could happen blood transfusion.
Everywhere.
And when people got disease, people were looking at you. Oh, so it just brought a whole lot of suspicion wherever you were from.
I'll even fast forward.
Yes, it came from Africa. It came from everyone. So I hear what you're saying, but what I love about what you've said is where you have, and I'm not going to say ignorance, because that would be very rude of me, but where you have a different way of belief, So you've
Mm-hmm.
got traditional, you've got the chiefs, and you've got the traditional way of doing things. And you, like you said, you're from the town, your
Mm-hmm.
lovely hair, your trousers, your mini skirts, and all,
Mm-hmm.
like our young people like to wear now. And then you go to the village, they're not going to want to talk to you.
Mm-mm.
So you have to, like my boss, when I first, when my first 3 years practicing as a lawyer, and my boss at the time used to say, Zena, you need to stoop to conquer.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't
Yes.
understand why he was sending me with files to the courts to go and file. I'm thinking, I'm a big lawyer, my parents are rich. They should send the messenger. And I was like, I just came out of school from the
Yeah.
town, not from the city. And he said, Zena, you need to stoop to conquer.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
it's so true then, and it's so true today. If you want to conquer, if you want to break down barriers, you have to stoop. So I love
That's
that.
it.
I love that example with the pen and everything. That's a fantastic, fantastic, fantastic. And like you said, you just stumbled into. You didn't know, and now
Mm-hmm.
it becomes your blueprints for everything that you do.
Yes, yes. And you are so right. That's my blueprint right there. And I'll just kind of like just add on to something that you mentioned very crucially. When I moved to the US, because I already was already on the path of advocacy work. I knew which organizations I wanted to be board members on. So I applied to be a board member on the YWCA, and then another organization that served people living with the virus. Boy, did I realize so much misinformation. And here I was in the US, right? We were already way past because we had been attacked by it in so many ways. And so on that board, there was always conversation. Well, it's a gay disease. And I'm
Yes.
like, no, 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 no. If you are seeing numbers within people who identify as LGBTQIA, that's well and fine, but you cannot define it as a gay disease because it's not, right? These can attack. And so you see, and so I saw this disconnect between information because we were responding to a situation that was so, grievous for us, right? So we made sure we had all the information we needed to make sure that we were educated about the virus, right? And so coming here, hearing a narrative that was completely opposite from what I knew, right, became also, so I became a beacon to conversation. So I remember my first time when I kind of like was in the board and I was sharing all this information. Everyone in that boardroom was like, okay, you are going to be our education person. And the first place they took me to do a presentation, they did a newspaper article. I remember going into that school. I still have it. I'm going to share it with you, Dr. Z. It's a very small country. Like when you know the US, if you go deep into the country, you're not talking to, black. It's mostly white farmers and,
Yes.
white schools and stuff. So
Redneck.
I remember I was supposed to speak with the school administrative. They ended up opening it up to the whole school so the kids could hear because of the background I had, right? And I remember being told, you cannot talk about sex. You cannot talk about condoms. You cannot talk. And I'm thinking to myself, am I back home? Because that's what we were doing. But it was amazing to see how globally at the time we were disconnected, right? So it meant information was very much disconnected and a lot of misinformation. And they did a huge article thanking us thanking me to come in there to talk about HIV in the way that we had responded to it in Zimbabwe. So again, just being guided, your path just guided in that way. So I wanted to just share to say, even here, there was so much misinformation when I first came. This was back in 2001, 2002, right? So, yeah.
Yes, I mean it's so funny. I remember in the 90s, I'd come back. I came back to London in the early 90s after living in Nigeria and practicing law for a couple of years. And I remember, the suspicion, once you knew, I lived in a complex and, people that had HIV, it was confidential, but somehow someone had leaked some confidential information. And we were all looking at them, you'd be in the lift and you'd be scared.
Yeah.
And so you're right. There was so much misinformation, and then when it now became apparent, okay, so after a while, Europe and UK and America, it had calmed down with the film Philadelphia with Tom Hanks, and then
Yes.
Washington. So that was to sort of bring a bit of a human, understanding that it's not like, so that kind of made things. And then it was now Africa. So all of a
Yeah.
sudden, it's like, this thing it's not from gay sex. It's from Africans, and so it shifted, and then all of a sudden on the continent, it was like, okay, let's say it's from. So where's this from? Are we having gay sex? All sorts of misinformation everywhere.
Yeah.
And this is a disease. And the sad thing, and this is, I mean, someone wrote a lovely comment, Samso, talking about the stigma and blame attached to Africans with HIV, and this is absolutely true. In the 80s and in the 90s, it was a celebrity, show business, Hollywood, lots of actors and died and stuff like that. And they said, okay, and then all of a sudden it shifted, and it was now an Africa problem, because obviously we didn't have enough money for the drugs and all the interventions and people forgot. So now the stigma has kind of stuck a little bit.
Yeah.
With okay, and so you're absolutely correct. The misinformation and all that. But this just leads me to another question, which I know you probably be expecting this. We've touched on it. This is such a challenging area, and I know we're not just going to be talking about HIV, but it's something that I know you've got a lot of experience, and you clearly have. But working in such a challenging environment, both in America, in Zimbabwe, how it must have been really intense. How were you able to sort of look after your mental health? Because you know how it is, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Yes.
Pouring. Would you like a cup of tea? I'm so sorry.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
I hope you like Earl Grey. That's what I did just before we started the show. Earl Grey, lovely.
I love Earl Grey. Yes, that's my kind of tea. Yes, please pour it away.
Okay. Get your cup. Yes. Right. Fantastic.
Like I said earlier, I'm not going to drink it with crumpets. It's way too late for crumpets, but I just had to put in the British accent, the crumpet. But I am definitely going to do it with chocolate. Since we just came out of Halloween,
I won't tell anyone. Don't worry. Yes. So talking about pouring, how have you? Because I know this must be really, really challenging on people's mental health, whether it's addictions, because I know you deal with addictions, whether it's drug addiction, whether it's alcoholic addiction, whether it's HIV, whether it's violence against women and girls, and we will touch on that, especially because very soon, I think on the 25th of November, we start UN 16 days of activism with regards to violence against women and girls. And just so that you know, it's 1 in 3 now. 1 in 4 in the UK. 1 in 3 gets killed. Violent femicide. But that's a different thing. We'll probably talk. I'll bring you back on the show to talk about that. But how, with all these various things that you've had to kind of get yourself involved in, help to solve their problems, help to give them a voice, help to make them visible, how have you been able to sort yourself out mentally? Because I can imagine that must be quite tasking.
It is. That's a very, very important question, because like you said, you cannot pour into an empty cup, right? So you cannot pour into an empty space in terms of yourself. You have to be in a space where there's a balance, right? Because you are dealing with issues that are very, very, very to the core of humanity. And I learned earlier on in my career, especially when I started, really getting into the sexual violence, right? When you have domestic violence, there's most likely there's sexual violence. And again, I always want to make sure that I have this disclaimer. We also, the numbers are extremely high amongst boys and men who are also abused. So we want to make sure that we have that conversation as well at some point, because these are the invisibles. When we don't name, we get more and more invisibles. So we always have to have that at the back of our heads. And so for me, my first path, after, when you go to college, you do your teaching degree and you're done, I knew I needed to understand human behavior, because I would find myself crying all day long, because for every time you're hearing all these stories, they touch you in a way that you don't understand. And then when you are trained as a social worker, you are asked not to cry with clients. I broke all those rules, because for me, my thing has always been, if I'm going to feed myself mentally and not carry some of the stuff, the horrific stuff that I can't even imagine people do to each other, and even with children, right, was to make sure that I'm on that journey where, if my crying needed to be in that space, I've allowed myself to do that, right? I gave permission to myself to make sure when I'm working with people, because you're working with human beings like you, right?
Yeah.
And by the time they share with you, they've already survived way more. And I understood that, like, to know that if someone, if survivor comes to you and they're talking to you about the most violent things that they've happened to them, and you're supposed to be part of that journey for them to maintain some type of balance, wellness, right? To exist with others who, we might assume normal, right? In a normal society, you had to be able to find balance in saying, how do I share your pain and still maintain some kind of sanity for yourself as well, because you also had to take care of your own family. You come here, but you also have all this. So for me, my thing, what I've done is really, I love exercise. So when I was a high school teacher, I taught English, English as a second language, and I also taught physical education. So I've always been very much into exercise. So I taught rugby, I umpired, I made sure you do all this. When you
Rugby.
see me,
Wow.
I
Rugby.
coach rugby. I
Oh,
even have
wow.
some world, players in cricket. I wish some of my students would be here. They always laugh when they see me now, right? Because I was a tough cookie, so to speak, when it came to physical education. So that was my hiding place, because I could just run for miles nonstop just to get all that out of my system, right? So the most important thing for me, and which I always encourage anyone who is in the space where you are advocating for others, right? And to always remember, you are not in front of anyone's journey. You are alongside whoever you are advocating, whatever community you're advocating. If you find yourself leading the conversation, then you're going to lose the people you are actually,
Yes.
unintentionally, right, advocating with. So you
Yes.
are there alongside. So
Yes.
part of that is, for me, the balance, making sure I'm exercising, making sure I'm learning, making sure I am getting involved with things that I love outside of the work that I know was really ordained to do, but specifically choosing activities that do not involve me in the space of whether I'm in therapy. And it has been very challenging, because a lot of times my family, even my own family, when I go home, that is here, we have issues here. You're the one who is constantly resolving these problems
Mm,
and issues,
mm,
and you get fatigued. But
yeah.
one thing I've learned with faith, when you know this is what you are meant to do, right? The fatigue comes, you cry, and it's okay for you to feel overwhelmed. It's
Yeah.
okay sometimes to even snap to say, I am not the family psychologist here.
No.
Okay. No, I don't want to do this. I've had moments where I've done that to my family, right? To say, I don't want anyone's problems. When I come home, I just want to enjoy the
Yeah.
mangoes. I don't
Yeah.
want to be, the
Yeah.
one to be the
Yes.
one in the
Yes.
middle of. So it's okay for you to take your journey, because it depends on how, just not making it personal is the
Yeah.
most important thing. And
Yeah.
see it as a blessing that you're able to be in this space, because when you are an interaction with any human being, right, consider that a blessing, because if you are you're a sponge to learning, you are there to receive what they're giving you. And I've found most of the tools that have helped me mentally is through interaction with all the people that I have been blessed to work with, alongside with. being in spaces with, and I was like, okay, I like the sound of that, and it becomes my mantra. So it's
Yeah.
always
Yes.
getting,
Yes.
from all these different places and feeding your soul, because
Yeah.
you are fed for some reason. You get things that resonate with you, and you
Yeah.
carry them like a banner, for
Yes.
yourself.
Yes.
So
Yes.
basically, that's how I continue to do the same things. I've not changed much. I mean, I don't run as much, but you find alternative things that also feed into your soul,
Yes.
because it's all about really feeding your soul with the stuff
Yes.
that actually you love doing, and don't find is overstraining yourself,
Yes.
basically. Yeah.
Yes. I love that. As you were speaking, there's so many things. I mean, this, I can just imagine this being a series, and maybe when we get offline we need to talk about this. I can see this being a series because there's so many things to unpack here. But
Mhm.
one of the things that you said that I really like, I mean, all the things you said I like, but you've talked about making sure that, at the beginning you said you cry. I remember when I first started coaching, I was doing abuse recovery and divorce recovery before
Mhm.
leadership. I used to cry all the time.
Mhm.
I would cry
Mhm.
when they're speaking to me. I'll cry when they tell their stories,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then I will take it home. And then you're taking someone else's stuff home to your own home, and then make
Mhm.
your own environment very heavy.
Yeah.
And so I had to, I spoke to my coach, my therapist, and I said, I can't be doing that, because
Mhm.
although, if you're an empath, and I know you're an empath as well, when you're an empath,
Mhm.
you kind of take on people, but you have to remember that
Mhm.
for you to be the strength that they need,
Mhm.
can't do that. You have to be as objective as possible. Like you rightly said, you can't take it personal. You can't
No.
look at them personally. Sometimes you'll have clients that you feel they could be your daughter, your son, your sister. You just have a light, like a lightning,
Yeah.
but you still have to know where to draw the line. Especially if things happen, where there's a loss of life, or they've been
Mhm.
incarcerated, or other things happen that you really can't help.
Mhm.
But the thing you've also, what I like that you said as well, is the fact that these people, these lovely people, these invisible people that you have had the privilege, I call it a privilege, and
Mhm. It is.
to serve and work alongside, you are learning stuff from them.
Mhm.
And what people seem to forget oftentimes is that when people are going through hardship, whatever that hardship might be, poverty,
Mhm.
violence, domestic abuse, addiction, whatever
Mhm.
it is, the rest of the world or the rest of society just casts them as if they have no use, as if there's nothing
Yes.
value in them. But
Yes.
these people are just like you and I, and anyone can fall on hard times, anyone can be addicted, anyone can
Mhm.
get raped, God forbid, but anyone could get raped, anyone could, domestic violence, does not look at you because of your class.
Mm-mm. No.
Addiction, you could be a CEO, a chairman of an organization, and you could be addicted to drugs or alcohol.
Yes.
You could be someone, as homeless person. It doesn't matter. It cuts across. So anyone
Mhm.
can fall down on their luck. And it doesn't, having these issues does not affect your ability to
Mm-mm.
give value.
Mm-mm.
Like you rightly said, you're speaking to these people, you're working alongside with them, and you're not taking away, you said you're not taking away their agency. So you're not working
Mhm.
in front of them, you're working alongside them, helping them
Mhm.
come to decisions that can help them, or if they don't want them, supporting them on their journey, but
Mhm.
understanding that they are people of value. I love they are people of value. And I have to say this so loud. For wherever you
Mhm.
are around the world, you may be,
Mhm.
this might be your story, you may be a victim or something, or even if you're not, if you know
Mhm.
people that have any of these stories, any of these experiences, please,
Mhm.
please stretch out a hand of fellowship. They are,
Yes.
because you are. We are. We
Yes.
we have
Because.
we Yes, we can't keep marginalizing people. We
Mm-mm.
marginalize
Mm-mm.
people for one step. Oh, I have 5 cars and you have one, or I have a bicycle and you have none, or
Mhm.
I have 2 feet and you have one. We like to other people. We do it on,
Yes.
on gender, we do it on, on qualifications, we do it on all sorts
Mhm.
of things. And so when you said that, it just, my heart just bled, because I can see so many people and there are people that may not even talk about it. In fact, what
No.
happens is that the people at the higher echelon of society, so
Mhm.
good jobs, good, they're the ones that typically may be experiencing domestic violence, or maybe
Mhm.
addicted to narcotics, but
Yes.
they won't talk. Doctors, people in the medical field, they
Mhm.
they have a high rate of suicide. They don't
Thank
talk.
you.
you
Thank
know
you.
you
Thank
know
you.
men, they're not like us that cry. Men don't talk about what they go through.
That's
So
it.
men, and so there's so many people that are invisible, either because they're within the system, or invisible because they don't feel that they cannot be vulnerable
They have
enough.
the right, exactly. Like they have the right to even talk about this, especially when they are in a space where they are privileged. Like you've just said, if a doctor is struggling with addictions, we are looking at them in a totally different way, but we're not looking at it from an illness perspective, right?
Mm,
What
mm,
has caused this? Why are we here?
mm.
One thing that you mentioned that I just wanted to just share with everybody here, my favorite book of all time, right? After I visited Auschwitz, right? So when we lived in France, so there was a school trip for the kids and all that. So I did go to Auschwitz and I bought Primo Levi's book, If This Is a Man. He died by suicide, right? Turin. I don't know if people are familiar. Turin, in the south of, because Lyon is very close to many different small cities, right? He died by suicide because he would walk. This is the story that is said. He would walk during Christmas time when people are celebrating, they're having a good time. And his thing was, even when we were being killed as survivors of the Holocaust, people continued to celebrate Christmas. It didn't stop them. It didn't stop them. And he could not understand how, even when we were aware human beings, we still could enjoy. So he is known in when you read more about him, he literally would walk around his neighborhood, watch through the windows and see people celebrating Christmas. And it would
Yes.
take him back when he was, in Auschwitz, to say, this was continuing on even when people were dying,
Yes.
the way
Yes.
the Holocaust was. So
Yes.
for me, he has always been my book to go to, right? I don't know how many copies. I have them in Latin, I have them in French, I have, because I just say to myself, I resonate to this, where sometimes when you see extreme human strife, and you cannot understand, to say the world continues on, right? We know
Yes.
there are wars going on there. So when there's a war going on, they're going to be victims of sexual violence, victims of mental health illness, victims of all kinds of
Yes.
stuff. So like you said, it's a good thing to get these things very topical, have a series going, and I would be happy to really continue having this conversation, because it's really wide and widespread, so that
Yes.
it touches people wherever you are, whether you are in the space of addictions, whether it's to do with the domestic violence, molestation. How do we continue to have these topics that are very difficult to talk about, and still continue to be, the advocates we need to be?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Even as you were speaking, I was trying not to get emotional. You think that you've conquered. When you're an empath,
Mhm.
you learn to kind of keep things at this. But every now and then, because I'm just thinking about all the different things that different people are going through,
Mhm.
different
Yes.
different levels of society. Obviously you have people that are homeless, and people that and they're in they're soup kitchens and all that, but there are people who need can't even be homeless.
No.
They're not earning enough to look after themselves, but
Mhm.
they're earning too much to get help from the state or anything, so they're in the middle. So they can barely feed themselves, and so there's
Mhm.
things going on.
Yeah.
And because we are, as a people, we are so insular and selfish. It's all about me, 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 me,
Mhm.
and my family, as long as it's okay for me.
Mhm.
Or we give a little handout. So you're like, so okay, someone's just sent me something on WhatsApp, okay, I'll just give a little 50
Yeah.
pounds, and you feel
Mhm.
you've done you've done your bit, but you're not there. You're not
Mm-mm.
there. You're not there. It's people like yourselves in the field
Yeah.
that that get yourself dirty, that
Mm-hmm.
that listen to people's stories, that get to touch. Oh man,
Mm-hmm.
my prayer is that as many people as possible can really advocate. You don't have to be an activist, but
Mm-mm.
you can just be your brother's keeper.
Thank you.
Be
Yes.
less judgmental. Make it
Mm-hmm.
possible for those people that are invisible, that it could be
Mm-hmm.
old people. God, I'm an old person now. It could be an old
No, you're not. You are definitely not.
it could be old people. Christmas is coming around the corner. In America, they've got Thanksgiving coming. It could be an old person, your next door neighbor. It doesn't matter about the
Mm-hmm.
gender, race. Just, find out, how can you help? How can you help? How
Mm-hmm.
can you help? I've got,
Yes.
time is running out and I have got so many questions for you. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What's your vision, Barbara? What's your vision for a world where the invisible are seen and
Mm-hmm.
empowered? What changes would you like to see most in terms of social justice? And
Social justice.
what would you
Mhm.
suggest in terms of how can our listeners, how can they get involved to support this
Mhm.
mission?
Right. That's a very loaded question. Many things come to mind. Of you've already picked on definitely one of them right there. When you spoke of when you see your neighbor is an elderly, right? You'll be surprised when you go over. I am known in my neighborhood to do that. We've created societies where we fear each other, right? And when we need that connectiveness in a big way, right? And I've learned that by just being very the kind of person I am, always being able to say, okay, I need to get connected with someone. I want to get to know you. Not to You have to differentiate between getting to know someone or just being nosy, right?
Yes,
Because
yes,
those
yes.
are very closely linked, and people sometimes don't realize that. And I love, there's a young girl in one of the shops I go in. She's always wearing a t-shirt saying, "Don't you even dare start me because you don't know the type of morning I had." I truly believe that. I
It's
truly believe
funny,
that.
but it's true. Funny, but true.
Thank you. Because you see, you hear, because you don't know what people are going through, and they have to show up in a way. It's almost like we have to have these personalities that we have, especially when you were talking about just going to work. When you're saying, if you're at work, put on your what do you call them, earphones, right? When you started
Yes, yes,
the
yes.
podcast. That is so true, because you don't know who is going to be listening to certain things that you're going to be talking about, right? Because they might not reach out for help, but that conversation that you are bringing through a cup of tea with Dr. Z will grow their strength in whatever space it is. So for me, this is not even rocket science. I let myself get led by the fact that I always tell myself I am going to have a great day, even when it doesn't. It's not even if it turns out to be bad, right? And knowing to separate things to worry about and concern that you have control over, and things that you don't have control over, right? I remember, I need to just share this with you so you kind of like get a picture of the type of person I am. My daughter, when before she went away and came back now, we were at one of the clinics, your 24-hour, because she had been sick a while. So I was like, okay, let's just go to a 24-hour. And we are sitting there. And when you are in this space of advocacy, you smell, you see violence, you see everything. So there was a young lady who was right behind us. So she goes in front, and then this young man follows her up. And I could tell, he literally was clutching to her just to make sure she doesn't say the wrong things. And I remember saying to my daughter, and you laugh because they always laugh about this. And I said, I know this guy threw this girl down the stairs. We are sitting in a whole like public area. And my daughter says, Mommy, please don't start. You're always doing this. And I'm like,
Sounds like
no.
my children. My children tell me the same thing. Yes.
Exactly. So,
Can't take
so
you anywhere, mom. Mind your business. It's not your business.
exactly. Thank you.
Way.
And we've become that kind of society where we try to mind our own business, but that's not the way we nurture each other. That's not the keeping my brothers well-being. Just cut the story short. So it ended up, I went into the bathroom. I followed her into the bathroom because she asked to go to the bathroom, and the guy actually followed her, but he couldn't get in. I went into there, put myself at risk in my daughter. But for me, it was the larger picture was, okay, I am not going to let this girl, and she's right here, and let her leave without getting help. So I ran into the bathroom, and he's standing by the door. And I said, and I gave her a number, and she shook her head to say, I cannot put it anywhere because you know. And it confirmed to me I knew what I needed to do. And guess what I did? I walked if you know the way in the US, our 24-hour clinics are. So you already have a police officer on the grounds. So I knew where they were because they were in the parking lot. So I walked over there, and I said, there's a girl who is in there, who registered right before me. And I know there are HIPAA laws to protect information, but I know she's in an abusive relationship. Do you know the police were called? They detained her for a very long time, right? Because they cannot also gather information and stuff until they got the CIT officers to come in and do all that. Guess what? It turned out he literally had kidnapped this girl from Pennsylvania. If you know, Indiana and Pennsylvania across.
Across,
So,
yes.
yes. So there was already a human trafficking situation that was happening.
Wow.
And for us, during this time of year in the US, this is where you have the highest levels of human trafficking because of the Super Bowl, right? So in my head, I just thought to myself, okay, I could see the bruises, right? And so, because she was white, and so she had bruises. I knew either they had fought or some type of, but I didn't even realize that. And I remember getting a call from the police officers to say, the mayor at the time, our Mayor Henry, has heard your story and would like for you to be on the domestic violence commission for the city of Indiana. Again, these steps just created for you. So we have to get to that place where I don't know. There's just something that happens because I don't want people to put themselves in
Danger. Yes.
in danger. But there's a calling you just feel you have to do it, right? And I can tell you that I listen to that voice, and I know when it asks me to react, and I did. And imagine what would have happened to this young lady, right? Imagine that. So she got protected, and he had warrants on him. The young man had warrants, of arrest on him. So it became a situation where they were able to arrest him. Wow. They saved this young lady from being trafficked right across. So yeah, that is a story I just wanted to share because as you are talking about, as you shared and rightfully so spoke of, always be caring, always have the eye. And it doesn't mean just now become Inspector Gadget. No, we are not saying get your, and start looking. But when you are inspired to reach out, you will know those things. Absolutely. You are nudged, and you know when to respond to that calling for sure.
Absolutely. Babra, I really, really don't want to stop this. We've run out of time, so definitely, we have to regroup. I think Dr. Audrey, I think someone said, we need to have a conference on this. But I have to thank you. Can you just final words? I want you to talk a little bit about, because it would be unfair not to do so. Just a little bit, maybe in a minute, talk a little bit about your business, about your organization in terms of investment opportunities across Europe, America, and Africa, and then finally, any final comforting words for perhaps people who you don't know and I don't know, but may be listening and feel that they are invisible, or they know people who are invisible and they want to know how to support.
Thank you. Yes, so one of the things I wanted to do for myself, of course, you have the part about giving to others, but I wanted to give back to myself at the same time, be cognizant, not losing that social work background, mental health. I still do it as a consultant for the state of Indiana, right? But my company is called Biz Global Group, based here in the US. So basically, the journey began with my association with the Atlanta Black Chamber of Commerce, and I'm also a board member of CastNet, and I see our chairperson, Charles Johnson, on the call here. So we wanted to build, we want to build a network of small, medium businesses around the world and connecting them to investors. Because like I shared earlier on, sometimes I am like awed at how God puts me in places where I've not even asked to be in, but God puts you in there, right? Because my faith puts me there. So I always say it's not out of my own intelligence, but there's a way that God just puts me in places. So I happen to just get that connection and then inspired to start this global group here. And it has been such an amazing journey. We recently just did a conference in October, successful one, Go Global. And Dr. Z, I know she participated in some way and form, and successful in that. We connect with businesses. We have access to investors that are here in the US, but at the same time, wanting to make sure we are building that economic empowerment, economic wealth for our communities, right? And so that at least at the end of the day, I truly, truly believe that we do have enough wealth in the world for everybody to live comfortably, right?
Yes.
If it wasn't because we are greedy, like they always say, the mouth of somebody is greedy. Even when it cannot open even wide, it continues to open until it breaks the
Yeah.
jaws. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I believe if we all do our part in terms of thinking of it in such different manner, we would definitely get there. So as a going away, I guess like you've asked, as a sending everybody away in what kind of space they should be in or how they can be. Find what inspires you the most. Don't try and eat the whole elephant, right?
Yes.
If it
Yes.
means you start polishing the elephant's nails, start
No,
there.
I like
Do
that.
that. If it means you need to start manicure before and you're like figuring out, oh, this is massive, while you're getting your strategy, together, start
I love
there.
that.
Because a lot of times people. Exactly. I know, right? Because everybody wants to change the world. You have to
Yes.
remember that. But
Yes.
we get so overwhelmed because the issues of the world are massive, right? And
Yes.
when I
Yes.
think of the topic we were talking about, the 16 days of activism, right? We are constantly celebrating gender, and acknowledging gender violence. But it's that kind of thing where you say you make it topical, make it relevant, right? In your own space. If it
Yes.
means you feed my kids grew up knowing this. We had a person who did not have a home for many years just down the road from us. So each time I would make breakfast for the kids to take to school, I would make a plate for him and pick it up when I picked up the kids and make sure he had dinner. So
Yes.
you start off there. You start
Just
somewhere,
small.
simple stuff.
Small.
Exactly. Simple
And
stuff.
nobody needs to know.
No,
Nobody. No.
nobody needs to know. That's it. Nobody needs to know. You start there because your world is around that environment, right?
Yes.
So the bigger world, there's so many people, and I know all of us on the call here, we are doing amazing work wherever we are. If it's something that you love, continue on that path, right? Don't get swayed away by, oh my goodness, I feel like I'm not doing enough, right? You are. You just have to stay consistent. You just have to
Yeah.
make sure your
Yeah.
narrative is consistent. You are
Yeah.
not pulled away by the glimmer and glamour of the world, because it happens, right?
Yes. Yes.
So you have to stay on those things that really ignite you, right?
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
where you, like, when you drink your glass of wine, you're like, oh my gosh, that was amazing. You're talking to yourself. That was amazing. I painted the nails of an elephant. I put blue, red, whatever. Let those who can do the legs and stuff do their part. Just
Yeah.
finding your part in that
Yes.
Ubuntu space
Yes.
is not for you to save the whole world, but
Yes.
it is for us to take those bits and pieces of and knowing when we are serving others versus serving our own purpose, right? We've got to make sure that we are very distinctive about that, because there's a purpose for others and there's purpose for you, right?
Yes.
Know the difference and
Yes.
make sure
Yes.
they don't run. They run parallel, but they're
Yes.
not overlapping each other, because then
Absolutely.
you get exhausted, you get overwhelmed. I've done my part, I don't need to, and then it becomes an angry conversation to yourself,
Yes.
right?
Yes. No, don't do it don't do it to please anyone.
No.
Don't, because just do it because you feel you need to do it.
Yes.
You're not in competition with anyone. You're not in competition with me.
No.
You're not in competition with Barbara. You're not in competition with Mother Teresa. Whoever. Just do your little bit.
Yes.
Do your little
calling.
bit.
Your calling.
Your little bit.
Yeah.
And that's all. Oh, I have to stop here, and I don't want to. I have to. I could talk to you forever. Oh, thank you very much. Dr. Audrey said, awesome.
Yes. Oh, my beautiful friend, Dr. Andrea. Yes. How are you? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. She's an awesome. That's another person you have to have on a cup of tea with Dr. Zee.
Oh, all right. Okay. Fantastic. So that's a shout out. Okay, Dr. Andrea, I'll be coming to you soon. But anyway, thank you so much, everyone, for staying on. We have overrun today, but it's been amazing. And I've already said it live. We will do a series of this. We will probably meet and figure out how we need to do this, because I think there are so many things to unpack, and we haven't even started. And for those of you that go to church, you would hear your pastor say, well, that was just the introduction after 2 hours. So this was the introduction. This was just the introduction in terms of Sheroes.
Yes.
The next time when I bring her back, we're going to talk about one particular person's story, and we're going to unpack that. So I'm just saying this now so that I remember one particular person's story. It might be before the end of this year, it might be early next year. And we're going to unpack that. A she-hero who is either, who might be, I'm sure Barbara would know someone who's either got the whole mental health issue, plus HIV, being able to raise a family, being able to do all sorts of things, and, talk about her story. She may even be dead, or he may even be dead, but talk about, that person's story, so that we know that these people matter.
Yes.
They matter. Thank you so much, Barbara. I could talk to you until tomorrow, but it's 8:20 here in the UK. So it might be probably for you, there'll be like 2:20. Is that right?
No, it's 4:21 right now. So yeah. So
Wow. So I'm gonna say bye-bye, but thank you so much. This has been a blast. I've learned so much. I'm so pumped up. I already do a lot already, but I'm thinking about other things I can do. And for all of you that are listening, wherever you are around the world, thank you so much. If you listen on the replay, I hope you'll be able to take a lot of value, make notes, and think about how you can make a difference, how you can actually cut the nails. You heard Barbara say, cut the nails off an elephant. Cut the nails off an elephant. Start with that. Or cut the nails, just do a manicure, and the rest is history. I matter because you matter. You matter because I matter. And for any of you that might be thinking, I'll just tell you a lovely message that I think will, I've been sharing it all evening, but I just want to tell you again, if you happen to be a woman, just so that you know, wherever you're listening from, you are an extraordinary woman. Thank you so much for listening, and God bless.
Thanks for listening to A Cup of Tea with Dr. Zee, your reinvention queen. We hope you've been motivated and inspired to go out there and conquer any obstacles and issues you may face. You can find Dr. Zena on all social platforms. Until next time, remember, you're not alone.